Hi, folks. Welcome back. Great to have you. Rush Limbaugh here behind the golden EIB microphone. Telephone number is 800-282-2882. You notice how often Obama says he's powerless to do anything, even stop the rioting in Furguson. Powerless to do anything about Benghazi. He's just powerless to do anything. He can't. He told the Hispanic community, hey, look, I can't just do amnesty. You know what? I'm just the president. There's this thing called a Constitution. I can't do it myself. I'd like to, but I just can't. He loves telling people, and he loves having it said about him how powerless he is. And this is the guy who had as his campaign slogan, yes, we can. Now his new slogan is, no, I can't, while he goes out and does everything he does. Look, I want to revisit something yesterday because I don't ever want one of the themes I think is important here to be lost in the daily avalanche of new developments. Remember that everything happening in Furguson, Missouri, is a myth. Everything is a myth. The fact that this happens all the time is a myth, and that's what's driving this. Even Spike Lee, in a soundbite that I didn't play, but I've got it here, talks about now there is a war on black men in America. There's a war on black men. And the implication is it's a war being conducted by white cops. But, of course, Spike Lee conveniently forgets to talk about all the black-on-black crime in this country, which is the majority of black crime, is black-on-black. The majority of black murder victims killed by black murderers. Chicago, Detroit, you name it, black-on-black crime is the number one criminal problem for African Americans. But that just won't do. That we have to sweep that aside. Don't even report that. To kind of keep that under wraps because you can't run on that, but you also can't fundraise on that, and you also can't further the idea that this racial divide hasn't improved since the days of slavery on that. And you can't perpetuate myths like are being perpetuated in Furguson, Missouri. I just want to again remind you of something. This is not common. It does not happen all the time. And yet, this story is being covered and treated by everybody involved as though it goes on so much that we've had our fill of it now. And we finally got to stop it. And the only way to stop it is to convict this cop because it's just going on. It's way too much. The black people of America are fed up. This has got to stop. The only problem is it isn't happening. It is irregular when this happens. It does not happen. It did happen a lot in the 60s. It did happen a lot prior to that. It did happen in the early 70s in the South, primarily when Democrats were in power. But it doesn't happen anymore. When this happened, just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, when the Furguson story erupted, what was the most recent example people hearkened back to? Rodney King. When did that happen? About 1990, 1991, over 20 years ago, was the last memorable case of cops killing and mistreating a white or a black perpetrator. Now, there have been some intermittently, but they didn't make the news. I mean, they were not national stories like this is. This is a myth. It is a total myth. A myth is the fuel that perpetuates this. Give you another example of how it's a myth. Last week, from the moment the story was reported until Friday, the assumption was that a gentle giant was walking along the street on a beautiful sunlit Saturday afternoon, thinking about, of all things, his excitement at beginning college very soon. Yeah, right. And then disaster struck. The media had been demanding video from a convenience store where a robbery took place, where the gentle giant might have been. Finally, that video was released. The media had been demanding the release of that video from the convenience store. The federal government, the DOJ, had been suppressing that video. They didn't want it released. The police chief finally relented and released it. And what did it show? It showed the gentle giant not being gentle. It showed a gentle giant robbing a convenience store and roughing up the proprietor. Box of cigars. It was crystal clear. It was unquestionably the gentle giant. And then from that moment on, full-out civil unrest began. Why? What was on that video? It wasn't doctored. It wasn't made up. It wasn't fake. It had not been photoshopped. It was real. And it showed the gentle giant not as a gentle giant. It totally destroyed the myth. And that's why everybody lost their minds. They had this in the bag. They had the cop in jail. They had the cop convicted until Friday when the video hit. The myth was totally nuked. The myth was totally destroyed. Here we had more evidence. Here we had more information, which everybody was demanding and everybody was clamoring for. And we got it. But because it went against the myth, it went against the narrative, all of a sudden, rioting began and looting began. Why? It was more truthful information. The only reason the looting began is because the myth had been blown sky high. Now, it wasn't clear-cut, and it wasn't going to be easy to put this cop in jail. Because now the entire circumstance changes. And we've had even more information. Now we know that the cop was really roughed up. He might have a blown orbital eye socket, bone range, whatever. The gentle giant was not just trucking down the street, minding his own business, thinking about going to college, and was harassed and taunted and killed by a white cop. That's not at all what happened, but that's what the myth was. And now the myth is gone, and people are mad. So now that the myth has been destroyed, they still have to somehow get back to it. And one of the ways they're doing that is to go after the DA. Now it's the DA, McCullough. The DA cannot possibly be fair. He's been DA for who knows how many years. He's 56 years old. He's been a Democrat. Nobody's ever had a complaint about the guy. At least not that anybody's ever heard. He's been trucking along, doing the job fine and dandy. Now, all of a sudden, Bob McCullough is unqualified. He needs to recuse himself. He needs to quit. He can't be fair. No, Bob McCullough may not get back to the myth and act on the myth. They can't trust that Bob McCullough will ignore all the evidence that disproves the myth. They're afraid that Bob McCullough might actually include the evidence that destroys the myth, and so he's got to go, because the myth must survive. The myth must triumph. Why does McCullough have to go? Well, he can't be fair because his father was a cop and was gunned down in the line of duty in 1964. And because of that, I just saw it on CNN. I just saw black Democrat senator, state of Missouri, said he can't be fair. His father was gunned down. He cannot be fair. He's biased toward the cops. What that means is we can't guarantee the outcome we want with this guy. Oh, McCullough even said that. McCullough, this is a big mistake. McCullough goes on TV and starts talking about his job and how he's going to deal with this. And he thinks that he's being proper when he says he will not guarantee an outcome because he doesn't yet know all the evidence. The grand jury hasn't heard it. When he said that he can't and won't guarantee an outcome, it was like last Friday all over again. And now he's got to go. And further evidence of how it's impossible for him to be fair. His mother worked for the police department, too. Did you know that? Yeah. And he's been really, really close to the cops all of these years. Really? He's a DA. He's been close to the cops? Who would have thought that? Are not most state attorneys, prosecuting attorneys, district attorneys, whatever you want to call them, federal prosecutor, are they not close to the cops? They are on the same side. And you see, any prosecutor is going to be on the side of the cops. That's the way the system's set up. At any rate, he's got to go. He said, can't guarantee an outcome. Father killed by a cop. So he's the latest challenge to the myth. He was minding his own business. So he's come out and said, okay, you want to get rid of me, you got to have the governor do it. The governor's the guy you have to go to. Grab soundbite 25. Here is Bob McCullough. He might pronounce it McCulloch. I'm not sure. I haven't heard his name pronounced. So it's either McCullough or McCulloch. But he was interviewed the other day about the grand jury commencing today. And here was his thoughts. This is what he said.
He undermines everything except the cover that he's pulled over his head. And that's his sole purpose in this. He said absolutely nothing last night that is in any way, shape, or form meaningful, and it only aggravates the situation. We're going to proceed, as I've laid out to people, until I'm told, if I'm told by the governor that I can't. And the most devastating thing that can happen is if a week from now, a month from now, he decides that he's taking me off this case, then everybody's starting over. So stand up, man up. Stand up and say, I have this authority. I am not removing McCullough. I am removing McCullough. And let's get on with this. This family deserves nothing less than that.
Talking about the governor at the beginning of the soundbite, the governor said, demanded a vigorous prosecution. Now this governor, he's just pandering. He's just pandering to Democrat voters. That's how shameless that is. He's not an idiot. Just pure pandering. And Claire McCaskill is engaging in some of the same pathetic pandering to Democrat voters and African Americans. I mean, what business does the governor have demanding a vigorous prosecution before the grand jury has even heard the case and returned an indictment or not?